Let me start with a situation that feels very real to people my age. Two teenagers get caught shoplifting the same item from the same store. Now, they didn't plan it, they didn't hurt anyone, they made the same mistake. But here's what happens next. One of the teenagers calls their parents. Their parents hire a lawyer. That lawyer negotiates with the prosecutor, and the case gets dismissed, reduced, and even sealed. But the other teenager can't afford a lawyer, so they're assigned a public defender who's juggling dozens of other cases. And they're advised to plead guilty just to move things along. Same action, same law, two very different futures. So here's the question that stayed with me. Why does this happen if the law is supposed to treat everyone the same? During the summer of 2024, I interned at the Chicago Appleseed Foundation, an organization focused on fairness and equity in our legal system. That experience changed how I understand justice, because for the first time, I wasn't just learning about how the legal system works. I was seeing how it actually operates every day for real people. Before that summer, my interest in law was mostly just academic. I had taken courses that explained how the legal system works, like trial courts, appeals, judicial discretion, the adversarial process. And instead of seeing about just online about how these play out, I actually got to see it in real life. And I actually got to learn about people whose outcomes weren't shaped by guilt or innocence alone, but by money, timing, access, and judgment. And that's when I realized something important. Law and justice are not always the same thing. So let me answer the why directly. Law and justice diverge because the legal system is run by humans making judgment calls under pressure with limited time and unequal resources. And not because people don't care or because rules don't exist, but because systems amplify inequality when human discretion and speed meet unequal starting points. Now, one of the first things I learned during my internship was how early inequality can enter the process, long before a judge ever sees a case. Police officers make discretionary decisions every day. Who gets arrested? Who gets a citation? And all of these choices can be legal. But discretion depends on perception, and perception depends on context. Two people can commit the same offense and be placed on completely different legal paths from that very first interaction. And that's just reality. Something else I learned that I thought was really interesting was cash bail. So here's what that looks like in practice. Someone is charged with a low-level offense. Now, they haven't been convicted of anything, but they're told they can go home if they can afford bail. And if they can't, well, then they have to stay in jail. So now think about the consequences. One person goes home, keeps their job, goes to school, and helps prepare their defense. But another is stuck in jail, missing work, missing life. Now, I learned something both in my coursework and during my internship. I learned that the legal system was adversarial. So here's what that looks like. The legal system isn't designed to discover absolute truth. Rather, it's designed to decide which side presents the stronger case. Now, a courtroom isn't a science lab. because it's a place where evidence is framed and narratives are built. And so this leads to a hard truth. Facts don't speak for themselves. People speak for them. I also saw how much outcomes depend on resources. Someone who can afford a private attorney gets time, investigation, and preparation. But someone who relies on an overworked public defender may get only minutes before a hearing. Now, this isn't about effort, because public defenders work incredibly hard. But it's more about volume. Because when one side has time to tell a story and the other doesn't, justice shifts, even if the facts stay the same. Now, another reason outcomes can differ that's harder to talk about, but impossible to ignore, is bias. Now, it's not always intentional and it's not always acknowledged. I learned about implicit bias, the assumptions we all carry based on our experiences, exposure, and environment. Now, these biases don't require bad intentions. They just require us to be human. Think about how fast decisions are made in the legal system. A judge deciding whether someone feels like a risk, or a police officer deciding whether someone looks suspicious. Two people can behave the same and still be read differently. And not because of what they did, but because of how they're perceived. And that's just how our legal system is. And bias doesn't usually announce itself because it shows up in questions like, does this person seem trustworthy? Or does this feel like a mistake or a pattern? So one thing I saw during my internship that made how the US legal system works clear is that when people believe that the system treats them unfairly, they stop believing that the rules are there to protect them, and they stop trusting it, and they stop participating. And people see these inequities and they turn away from the law. But I didn't, because I realized that justice doesn't exist on autopilot. It depends on the people inside the system. Because yes, lawyers are translators between people and power and facts and meaning. But they also are rule followers. And I think that the reason that law and justice are different is because the law depends on rules and justice depends on judgment. Thank you.